Thunder rolls across the darkened streets as rain pounds the asphalt outside the Iron Ravens Clubhouse in Chicago's South Side, 2025. Inside, leather-clad bikers share whiskey and war stories, their voices mixing with the rumble of thunder. Then comes a sound that cuts through everything else. 3 small knocks on the heavy steel door. Nobody knocks on this door uninvited. Not cops, not rivals, not anyone with sense. The room falls silent as boots scrape against concrete floors. When the door swings open, every hardened face stares in disbelief at what stands before them. A little black girl, maybe 6 years old, soaked to the bone and shivering. Her small hand clutches a torn purple blanket as tears stream down her bruised cheek. Her voice barely rises above a whisper, but her words hit like lightning. They beat my mama. What happens next will change everything these outlaws thought they knew about family, loyalty, and redemption. Will the club's most feared leader show mercy or turn away? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silence stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Every eye in the room turned toward Marcus Reaper Johnson, the club's president, whose reputation for violence had earned him respect and fear in equal measure. His leather jacket bore the patch that marked him as leader, a grinning raven with crossed talons worn smooth by years of wear and countless battles. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, staring down at the trembling child. Rain dripped from her matted braids onto the concrete floor, each drop echoing in the stillness behind him. He could feel the weight of expectation from his brothers. This wasn't their world. Children didn't belong in the darkness they inhabited. "Jesus Christ, Reaper," muttered Tommy Hammer Washington from his perch at the bar. "What the hell are we supposed to do with a kid?" Marcus's mind raced back 35 years to another stormy night. Another frightened child standing in a doorway. That child had been him, 8 years old, watching his stepfather's fist connect with his mother's jaw for the last time. He remembered the taste of blood in his mouth, the sound of sirens in the distance, the way the social worker's cold hands had felt when she led him away from the only home he'd known. "They beat my mama," the little girl whispered again, her words cutting through his memories like a blade. The other bikers shifted uncomfortably. Snake Davis spat tobacco juice into a cup and shook his head. "Call the cops, Reaper. This ain't our problem." But Marcus knelt down slowly, his massive frame folding until he was at eye level with the child. Up close, he could see the purple bruise blooming across her left cheek, the way her small hands shook as she clutched that torn purple blanket like a lifeline. "What's your name, little one?" His voice, usually harsh with authority, softened to barely above a whisper. "Aisha," she hiccuped, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Aisha Thompson." "Aisha," Marcus repeated the name like he was testing its weight. "Where's your mama now?" Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "The bad men took her. They said if she tells anybody what she saw, they'll hurt us both real bad." A cold rage began building in Marcus's chest, the kind that had made him legendary in these streets. But this time it felt different, cleaner somehow. This wasn't about territory or respect, or the petty wars that usually consumed their lives. This was about protecting something innocent in a world that seemed designed to destroy it. "Jamal," Marcus called without turning around. "Ghost." Jamal Harris materialized from the shadows near the pool table, his pale skin and silent movements having earned him his road name years ago. "Take Washington with you. Check the area 3 blocks out in every direction. Look for signs of struggle, blood, anything that doesn't belong." Hammer pushed off from the bar, his scarred knuckles already itching for action. "You want us to ask questions?" "Careful questions. Don't spook anybody, but find out what people know about missing women, drug dealers moving product, anything that might connect." The two men grabbed their jackets and headed for the door, their boots heavy on the concrete. Marcus turned his attention back to Aisha, who was watching the exchange with wide, frightened eyes. "Are you going to call the police?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Marcus almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about the situation. The police in this neighborhood were either bought off or too scared to venture into certain territories after dark. If someone had taken Aisha's mother, it wasn't random street crime. This had the feel of organized violence, the kind that left bodies in rivers and witnesses in shallow graves. "No, sweetheart. We're going to handle this ourselves." Behind him, several club members exchanged glances. Getting involved in whatever had happened to this child's mother meant stepping into unknown territory, possibly starting a war with whoever was responsible. But Marcus's word was law in this clubhouse, and his decision had been made the moment he saw the fear in Aisha's eyes. "Come on," he said gently, extending his hand toward her. "Let's get you somewhere warm and safe." Aisha hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed her tiny hand in his massive palm. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. A protective instinct he hadn't experienced since his own childhood had been stolen from him. Whatever it took, whoever was responsible, he would make sure this little girl got her mother back, even if it meant going to war with the devil himself. Marcus led Aisha through the clubhouse, past the bar where bottles of whiskey gleamed under dim lights, and past the pool table where cigarette smoke hung in lazy spirals. The other bikers watched in fascination as their fearsome leader guided the small child with unexpected gentleness. "This way, Aisha," Marcus said, opening the door to his private office at the back of the building. The room was spartanly furnished, a desk, 2 chairs, a safe in the corner, and filing cabinets that held the club's business records. But on a shelf behind his desk, barely visible in the shadows, sat a small wooden eagle, hand-carved and worn smooth by countless childhood hands. Aisha's eyes immediately found the toy. "You have a birdie," she said, momentarily forgetting her fear. Marcus followed her gaze and felt heat rise in his cheeks. He'd forgotten the eagle was there, a relic from the brief period when he'd believed in things like hope and safety, before the foster homes and juvenile detention centers had taught him that the world was divided into predators and prey. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." "Doc," Marcus called out, and within moments a grizzled man in his 60s appeared in the doorway. Dr. Raymond "Doc" Evans had been patching up bikers for 20 years, ever since he'd lost his medical license for operating on club members without asking too many questions. His hands might shake from too much bourbon, but they were steady enough when lives depended on it. "What we got here?" Doc asked, taking in the scene with professional eyes that had seen everything from bullet wounds to overdoses. "Aisha needs looking at," Marcus said simply. "Someone hurt her." Doc nodded and approached the child slowly, the way he might approach a wounded animal. "Hey there, little darling. I'm Doc. I help people feel better. Can I take a look at that bruise on your face?" Aisha instinctively pressed closer to Marcus, her small hand finding his larger one. The trust she showed surprised him. Children usually ran from men like him, and for good reason. "It's okay," Marcus said softly. "Doc's one of the good guys. He's going to make sure you're not hurt anywhere else." As Doc examined Aisha with gentle hands, his expression grew increasingly grim. The bruise on her cheek was fresh, maybe 6 hours old. But there were older marks, too. Finger-shaped bruises on her upper arms that spoke of rough handling. A partially healed cut on her lip that suggested this wasn't the first time someone had hurt her. "Defensive wounds," Doc murmured to Marcus, indicating small scratches on Aisha's palms. She tried to fight back, The rage that had been simmering in Marcus's chest flared white-hot. Whoever had done this to a 6-year-old child deserved the kind of justice that couldn't be found in any courtroom. "Aisha," Marcus said, crouching down beside her again. "Can you tell me about the bad men? What did they look like?" She sniffled and wiped her nose with the torn purple blanket. They had pictures on their arms, like yours, but different, and one of them had gold teeth that sparkled when he smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. "Pictures on their arms," Marcus repeated. "Tattoos?" Aisha nodded. "The scary man with the gold teeth. He grabbed Mama and said she saw something she wasn't supposed to see. He said if she talked to anybody, they'd come back and hurt us both." Marcus exchanged a meaningful look with Doc. This was starting to sound like cartel business, the kind of organized crime that had been creeping into their territory over the past year. If Aisha's mother had witnessed something, a murder, a drug deal gone wrong, police corruption, the people responsible wouldn't hesitate to eliminate loose ends. "Where did this happen, sweetheart?" Marcus asked. "Do you remember the house with the broken fence? Mama was taking me to Mrs. Jackson's because she said it wasn't safe at home anymore, but the bad men were waiting." Doc finished his examination and caught Marcus's eye. "She's dehydrated and exhausted, but nothing that won't heal. The emotional trauma is what worries me." Marcus nodded. He'd seen enough violence to recognize the hollow look in Aisha's eyes, the way she flinched at sudden movements. Someone had terrorized this child, and the protective instinct that had been dormant in him for decades roared to life. "Aisha, you're safe now," he said with quiet conviction. "Nobody's going to hurt you while you're here." She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "You promise?" Marcus Johnson had made few promises in his violent life, and he'd kept even fewer. But looking into this child's frightened face, he felt something shift inside him that he didn't fully understand. "I promise," he said, and meant every word. Dawn broke gray and cold over the city as Hammer and Ghost fired up their Harleys in the Clubhouse parking lot. The modified police scanner crackling on Hammer's bike had been picking up chatter all night. Domestic disturbances, drug busts, the usual urban symphony of violence and desperation. But nothing about a missing woman named Thompson. Ghost pulled his bike alongside Hammer's, his pale face hidden behind wraparound sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "Where are we starting?" "3 blocks east," Hammer replied, checking the Glock tucked beneath his leather jacket. "Work our way out in a grid pattern. Kid said something about a house with a broken fence." They rode through neighborhoods where hope went to die, past boarded-up storefronts and houses with bars on every window. This was territory where people minded their own business and asked no questions, where witnesses had a habit of disappearing and police reports got lost in bureaucratic shuffle. The first house with a broken fence turned out to be a dead end, literally. An elderly man sat on the porch, his glassy eyes and slack jaw indicating a recent overdose. No signs of struggle, no indication that anyone else had been there recently. The second location looked more promising. A chain-link fence hung loose from its posts, and dark stains on the concrete walkway. Could have been blood or motor oil. Hammer dismounted and examined the ground, while Ghost kept watch from his bike. "Tommy," Ghost called softly, using Hammer's real name the way he did when things got serious. "Check this out." Ghost was examining something caught on the broken fence. A small piece of fabric, purple and soft, that matched the material of Aisha's torn blanket. Hammer bagged it carefully, though he doubted they'd need forensic evidence for what they were planning. The police scanner crackled to life again, and this time the transmission made both men freeze. "Unit 47, we have reports of shots fired at 1247 Halstead Street. Possible drug-related incident. Respond code 2. Hammer and Ghost exchanged glances. Code 2 meant no urgency, No sirens. In this neighborhood, that usually meant the cops already knew what they'd find and weren't particularly motivated to investigate thoroughly. They rode toward Halsted Street, following the police cruiser at a discreet distance. The house at 1247 was a typical crack den. Windows covered with plywood. Front yard littered with debris. The kind of place where screams wouldn't draw attention from neighbors who'd learned to mind their own business. 2 patrol officers emerged from the house, shaking their heads. Ghost strained to hear their conversation as they returned to their cruiser. Nothing we can do if nobody wants to press charges. Probably just dealers settling scores. Waste of taxpayer money coming out here. The cruiser pulled away, leaving the scene unprotected. Hammer and Ghost waited 10 minutes before approaching the house. The front door hung open, revealing an interior that reeked of desperation and violence. Inside, they found signs of a struggle. Overturned furniture, bloodstains on the wall, and most telling of all, a woman's purse dumped on the floor. Hammer rifled through it carefully, finding a driver's license that made his blood run cold. Keisha Thompson, age 29. The photo showed a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, the same delicate features they'd seen in Aisha's face. "Ghost," Hammer called, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Look at this." Scattered near the purse were several photographs, the kind that street-level dealers kept as insurance against their suppliers. But these weren't typical drug operation photos. These showed what appeared to be an execution. 3 men in expensive suits forcing someone to kneel beside a car trunk, while a 4th man in cartel colors prepared to fire a pistol. One of the men in suits wore a police badge. "Jesus," Ghost whispered. "She witnessed a cop execution." Hammer studied the photos more carefully. The man with the gun had distinctive gold teeth that caught the camera flash, and his arms were covered in tattoos that looked like viper designs. Aisha's description had been remarkably accurate for someone so young and terrified. Viper Cartel, Ghost identified, recognizing the snake tattoos. They've been moving into this territory for months. "Pushing out the local dealers and killing cops who won't play ball," Hammer added grimly. They gathered the evidence carefully, knowing that bringing it to the police would be useless if corruption ran as deep as these photos suggested. The scanner on Hammer's bike crackled again, but this time the transmission was in Spanish, too fast and garbled for either man to follow completely, but they caught enough words to understand the urgency. "Thompson, Nina, and Eliminar, find the woman, find the child, eliminate both." "We need to get back," Ghost said, already heading for his bike. "They're not just looking for the mother anymore. They know about Aisha." Aisha woke up on the clubhouse couch to the sound of unfamiliar voices and the smell of bacon frying. For a moment, panic seized her as she struggled to remember where she was. Then she saw Marcus sitting at a nearby table, and the events of the previous night came flooding back. "Morning, sweetheart," Marcus said gently. "You hungry?" Before Aisha could answer, the clubhouse door opened, and a woman walked in carrying shopping bags from Target. She was maybe 35, with long braided hair and the kind of easy confidence that came from years of navigating dangerous men and dangerous places. "Angel," Marcus called out, relief evident in his voice. "Thanks for coming." Angel Washington, no relation to Hammer despite the shared last name, had been Marcus's on-and-off girlfriend for 3 years. She worked as a bartender at a biker-friendly establishment across town and had seen enough of club life to understand its rhythms and rules. But she'd never seen Marcus with a child before, and the sight of him speaking softly to the little girl was something entirely new. "So this is Aisha," Angel said, setting down her bags and approaching slowly. "Marcus told me you've had a rough night, baby girl." Aisha clutched her torn purple blanket closer and studied Angel with the careful attention children reserve for adults who might represent either safety or threat. Angel passed whatever test Aisha was administering, because after a moment the little girl nodded. I brought you some things, Angel continued, opening one of the shopping bags. Clean clothes, some toys, and she pulled out a picture book with a colorful cover. A story about a brave little warrior who protected people who couldn't protect themselves. Aisha's eyes widened as she examined the book. The warrior on the cover wore shining armor and carried a shield, but her face was kind rather than fierce. Will you read it to me? Of course, honey. As Angel and Aisha settled on the couch with the book, other club members began arriving for the day. They stopped short when they saw the domestic scene playing out in their sanctuary of leather and steel. Snake Davis walked in carrying a bag that clinked with the sound of glass bottles. Brought some juice for the kid, he announced gruffly, as if explaining why he'd suddenly developed a soft spot for children. Grape juice? Kids like grape juice, right? Thanks, Snake, Marcus said, hiding a smile. Bulldog Jenkins appeared next, carrying what appeared to be a hunting knife in an elaborate leather sheath. Figured she might need protection, he explained, then caught Angel's horrified look. I mean, for when she's older, teenager stuff. Angel intercepted the weapon smoothly. Maybe we'll save that for her 16th birthday. The parade of inappropriate gifts continued as more club members arrived. Jimmy Wrench Carter brought a motorcycle chain that he'd somehow convinced himself could be used as a jump rope. Roadkill Evans contributed a leather jacket in child size, complete with patches and studs that would have made Aisha look like a miniature biker. Through it all, Aisha watched the proceedings with growing fascination rather than fear. These rough men with their tattoos and scars were trying to take care of her in the only way they knew how. Their gifts might be unsuitable, but their intentions were genuine. The warrior lived in a fortress, Angel read from the picture book, but she spent most of her time traveling the kingdom. Helping people who were in trouble like Marcus, Aisha asked, looking over at the club president who was trying to figure out what to do with a motorcycle chain jump rope. Yeah, baby, Angel said softly. Like Marcus, as the morning progressed, Aisha began to relax in the strange environment. She colored in a coloring book that Snake had produced from somewhere, ate bacon and eggs prepared by Doc, and listened to stories that the bikers told with increasing enthusiasm. But it was when Marcus sat down beside her with the picture book that something special happened. His voice, usually commanding and harsh, became gentle as he read about the brave warrior's adventures. The warrior knew that sometimes protecting people meant fighting scary monsters, Marcus read. But she wasn't afraid, because she knew that good was stronger than evil, and love was stronger than hate. Aisha leaned against Marcus's side, her small body relaxing completely for the first time in days. Marcus, she said quietly, are you going to fight the monsters who took my mama? Marcus looked down at her upturned face, seeing trust and hope in her eyes that he hadn't encountered in decades. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like armor. Yes, Aisha, he said, his voice carrying the conviction of a sacred vow. I'm going to bring your mama home. Hammer and Ghost returned to the clubhouse with grim faces, and evidence that painted a picture darker than anyone had imagined. Marcus listened in silence as they described the crime scene, the photographs, and the radio chatter that confirmed Aisha and her mother were marked for death. Vipers, Marcus said, rolling the name around his mouth like a curse. I've been hearing rumors about them for months. They're not local muscle. This is cartel money and cartel organization. Ghost spread the photographs on the table, careful to keep them away from Aisha's line of sight. The images told a story of systematic execution. Professional killers who eliminated witnesses with the same efficiency they used to move drugs and launder money. This guy Hammer pointed to the man with gold teeth. He's the one Aisha described. Name's Luis Oro Ramirez. Word on the street is he's the cartel's cleanup specialist. Marcus studied the photo of the cop's execution. The victim appeared to be Detective Ray Johnson. No relation despite the shared surname who had been reported missing 3 weeks earlier. His department had claimed he was working undercover, but the photo revealed a different truth. "How deep does this go?" Marcus asked. "Deep enough that bringing this to the police is suicide," Ghost replied. "We don't know who else is compromised, and even the clean cops won't be able to protect witnesses against cartel retaliation." Angel approached the table, having settled Aisha with her coloring books on the far side of the room. "What about federal agents? FBI, DEA? Takes time to make those connections," Hammer said. "Time we might not have." As if summoned by their conversation, the police scanner crackled to life with another transmission in Spanish. Ghost translated what he could catch: references to the Clubhouse, descriptions of motorcycles, and most chilling of all, orders to retrieve the package before it could cause more problems. "They know she's here," Marcus said quietly. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The Vipers had resources that extended beyond street-level dealing. They had surveillance capabilities, informants in law enforcement, and the kind of organizational structure that could coordinate complex operations across the city. "We need to move her," Angel said immediately. "Where?" Marcus asked. "They've got reach we don't fully understand yet. Safe houses are only safe until they're not." Doc, who had been listening from behind the bar, cleared his throat. "My clinic," he offered. "It's in neutral territory, and I've got medical equipment that could help if she gets hurt. Plus, it's the last place they'd expect to find her." Marcus considered this. Doc's clinic served everyone in the neighborhood without questions. Dealers, addicts, working girls, and the occasional honest citizen who couldn't afford real medical care. It was a sanctuary of sorts, protected by the unwritten rule that violence against medical facilities brought heat nobody wanted. "Not good enough?" Ghost said, examining one of the photos more closely. "Look at this." He pointed to a detail in the background of one execution photo. Brass knuckles with an intricate Aztec design lying on the ground beside the victim. The metalwork was distinctive, the kind of custom piece that carried significance beyond mere weapons. "I've seen those before," Hammer said grimly. "They belong to Carlos Jefe Morales. He's not just cartel muscle. He's a regional commander. If he's personally involved in this cleanup operation, they're not going to stop until they find Aisha and her mother." Marcus felt the familiar cold calculation that had kept him alive through decades of violence. This wasn't going to be solved by hiding or running. The Vipers had made it personal the moment they decided to hunt a 6-year-old child. "How many men does Morales typically travel with?" Marcus asked. "Dozen, maybe 15. Professional killers, not street dealers playing soldier. And they know we've got Aisha. They know someone's got her. They might not know it's us specifically, but they'll figure it out soon enough." Marcus walked over to the window and looked out at the street. It was quiet now, but that wouldn't last. Soon there would be cars driving slowly past, strangers asking questions in local bars. Pressure applied to anyone who might have information about a missing child. "Then we don't wait for them to come to us," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority that had made him a leader among dangerous men. "We take the fight to them first." Hammer and Ghost exchanged glances. They'd been expecting this moment since they discovered the photographs. Marcus Johnson didn't run from fights, and he sure as hell didn't let threats against children go unanswered. "What are you thinking?" Angel asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. Marcus turned back to the room, his face set in the hard lines that his enemies had learned to fear. "I'm thinking it's time the Vipers learned what happens when they threaten family." That evening, Marcus retreated to his office and locked the door behind him. From the bottom drawer of his desk, he pulled out a small metal box that hadn't been opened in 15 years. Inside, wrapped in faded tissue paper, were 2 dog tags on a broken chain. The metal was tarnished with age, but the stamped letters were still clear. Johnson, William J. U.S. Army, Vietnam, 1968 to 1970. His father's tags. The only thing Marcus had left from the man who died when Marcus was 12. Killed not by enemy fire in the jungles of Southeast Asia, but by a drunk driver on a rainy Tuesday in downtown Chicago. Bill Johnson had been a decorated sergeant who'd earned his stripes in the Mekong Delta, leading reconnaissance missions that required equal parts courage and cunning. Marcus had never told the club about his father's military service or about the tactical knowledge he'd absorbed during late-night conversations before his father's death. The Army had tried to recruit Marcus after high school, but by then he'd already chosen a different path, one that led through juvenile detention, street gangs, and eventually to the Iron Ravens Brotherhood. But the lessons remained. How to plan an operation, how to gather intelligence, how to strike hard and fast while minimizing casualties among your own people. Skills that had served him well in the biker world, even if their origin remained his secret. Now facing an enemy with military-grade organization and resources, those lessons became invaluable. Marcus spread a map of the city across his desk and began marking known Viper locations based on the intelligence Hammer and Ghost had gathered. 3 suspected safe houses, 2 drug processing labs, 1 legitimate business, an auto repair shop that probably served as a front for money laundering. The knock on his door interrupted his planning. "Come in," he called, quickly sliding the dog tags back into their box. Ghost entered, followed by Hammer and Doc. Behind them came 4 other club members, Snake Davis, Bulldog Jenkins, Jimmy Wrench, and Roadkill Evans. The core of the Iron Ravens fighting force, men who'd proven themselves in countless street battles. "We've been talking," Ghost said without preamble. "This isn't going to be like our usual territorial disputes. These aren't local dealers we can intimidate or beat into submission. This is war against professional killers." Marcus nodded. "I know. That's why we need to approach it like soldiers, not like bikers." The statement drew surprised looks from several club members. Marcus Johnson was known for his tactical thinking, but he'd never spoken in explicitly military terms before. "You got something in mind?" Hammer asked. Marcus turned the map so they could all see it. "We hit them simultaneously at multiple locations, create chaos, gather intelligence, and most importantly, send a message that Aisha is under our protection." "How many men can we field?" Doc asked, "including prospects and hangarounds, maybe 20, but I don't want to risk everyone on this. We keep it to the core members, people who know how to follow orders and won't panic under fire." Snake Davis studied the map with the concentration of someone who'd spent years planning illegal activities. "This auto shop, it's in neutral territory. Hitting it brings less heat than going after their safe houses. It's also where they're most likely to have records," Marcus added. "Financial information, contact lists, maybe even details about where they're holding Keisha Thompson." Wrench pointed to another location. "What about this warehouse district? Ghost and I did some reconnaissance yesterday. Lots of activity, but it's isolated. We could hit it without worrying about civilian casualties." Marcus felt a familiar satisfaction as his team began thinking tactically. These men might not have formal military training, but they understood violence, and they trusted his leadership. More importantly, they'd accepted that saving Aisha's mother was worth risking their lives. "Here's how we do it," Marcus said, pulling out a black marker. 3 teams, 3 targets, simultaneous strikes at 2:00 a.m., when they're least likely to expect trouble. He began drawing on the map, marking approach routes and escape paths with the precision his father had once used to plan jungle patrols. Team 1 would hit the auto shop. Team 2 would take the warehouse. Team 3 would conduct surveillance on the main safe house, gathering intelligence for a potential follow-up operation. "Rules of engagement," Marcus continued. "We're not there to start a massacre. We gather intelligence, send a message, and get out clean. Anyone who surrenders gets zip-tied and left for the cops. Anyone who shoots first gets put down permanently." The room was quiet as the plan took shape. These men had followed Marcus into dozens of conflicts, but this felt different, more serious, more dangerous. "Questions?" Marcus asked. Ghost raised his hand slightly. "What about Aisha? If this goes sideways, they might retaliate against the clubhouse. Marcus had already considered this. Angel takes her to Doc's clinic during the operation. If we're not back by dawn, she drives Aisha to the FBI field office and tells them everything. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was actionable. And sometimes action was better than waiting for the enemy to choose the time and place of battle. The auto repair shop sat dark and silent at 1:47 a.m., its chain-link fence topped with razor wire that gleamed under distant streetlights. Marcus crouched behind an abandoned car across the street, watching the building through night vision binoculars that Ghost had acquired through channels no one discussed. 2 guards, he whispered into his radio headset. One at the front office, one doing walking patrols around the perimeter. Hammer's voice crackled through the earpiece. Warehouse team in position. I count 3 vehicles. Unknown number of personnel inside. Surveillance team ready, reported Snake Davis from his position overlooking the main safe house. Quiet so far, but there's definitely movement behind the windows. Marcus checked his watch. 13 minutes until coordinated strike time. He'd positioned himself with Team 1, Bulldog, Jenkins, and Jimmy Wrench, because the auto shop represented their best chance of finding actionable intelligence. Financial records, phone numbers, addresses of other cartel operations. Remember, Marcus transmitted to all teams, we're not here to be heroes. Get in, get what we need, get out alive. At exactly 2:15 a.m., Marcus gave the signal. Team 1 moved like shadows across the street. Bulldog cut through the fence with bolt cutters, while Wrench disabled the building's alarm system using skills learned during his younger, more criminal days. Marcus approached the walking guard from behind, applying a sleeper hold that dropped the man unconscious in seconds. The front office guard proved more alert, reaching for his weapon as the bikers burst through the door. But military training trumped street reflexes, and Marcus had the man zip-tied and gagged before he could raise an alarm. Clear, Marcus whispered into his radio. Warehouse secure, came Hammer's reply. 2 prisoners, no casualties. The auto shop's back office was a treasure trove of cartel business records, ledgers showing drug transactions, payroll information for corrupt cops, and most importantly, a list of safe houses with detailed security information. Marcus photographed everything with a digital camera, working methodically despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. That's when he found the encrypted cell phone. The device was sophisticated military-grade encryption that suggested the Vipers had access to technology far beyond typical street dealers. But it was currently receiving text messages in Spanish, and Marcus's limited language skills were enough to recognize key words Thompson, Nina, and Eliminar. Ghost, you copy? Marcus transmitted. Here, boss. I need you at the auto shop. Found something that requires your language skills. Ghost arrived within minutes, having left his surveillance position to roadkill Evans. He examined the phone with professional interest, scrolling through recent messages with increasing concern. They know about the clubhouse, Ghost said quietly. They're planning to hit us at dawn. Marcus felt cold satisfaction. His father had always said that good intelligence was worth more than superior firepower. By striking first, they'd gained access to the enemy's communication network and learned about the planned retaliation. What else? Marcus asked. There's an address here. Warehouse on the south side, different from the one Hammer hit. Messages indicate they're holding the package there. Keisha Thompson has to be. And Marcus, they're not planning to keep her alive much longer. There's a message about cleanup scheduled for tomorrow night. Marcus photographed the phone's contents, including contact numbers that might prove useful later. Then he carefully placed the device back where they'd found it, ensuring the Vipers wouldn't immediately realize their communications had been compromised. All teams, extract now, Marcus ordered. We've got what we came for. The withdrawal went smoothly, each team disappearing into the urban landscape with practiced efficiency. They regrouped at a 24-hour diner 10 miles from the clubhouse, far enough away to avoid immediate retaliation, but close enough to respond if the cartel moved against Aisha. Over coffee and pie that no one really wanted, Marcus shared what they'd learned. The Vipers were more organized and better funded than anyone had suspected. They had safe houses throughout the city, corrupt cops on their payroll, and sophisticated communication equipment that suggested backing from major cartel operations. But they also had Keisha Thompson, and they planned to kill her within 24 hours. "So, what's the play?" Hammer asked, stirring sugar into coffee with hands that still shook slightly from adrenaline. Marcus studied the photographs of the warehouse address, already formulating plans that would require everything he'd learned about small unit tactics and urban warfare. "We go get her," Marcus said simply. "Tonight, before they realize we've compromised their communications," Ghost looked up from his own coffee. "That warehouse will be heavily defended. This won't be a quick in-out operation." "No," Marcus agreed. "This will be war." Aisha's screams pierced the pre-dawn darkness of Doc's clinic, jolting Angel awake from the uncomfortable chair where she'd been dozing. The little girl thrashed on the examination table, trapped in a nightmare that replayed horrors no child should carry. "Mama, don't let them hurt Mama," Aisha cried out, her small fists striking at invisible attackers. Angel moved quickly to the table, gathering Aisha in her arms and speaking in the soothing tones she'd learned from years of calming frightened women in dangerous situations. "You're safe, baby. It's just a dream. You're safe." But Aisha's terror ran deeper than nightmares. As she gradually awakened, Angel noticed something that made her blood run cold. A small hospital bracelet around Aisha's wrist, partially hidden beneath the sleeve of her nightgown. The plastic was yellowed with age, suggesting it had been there for weeks or months. "Aisha, honey," Angel said gently. "Can you tell me about this bracelet?" Aisha looked down at her wrist as if seeing the bracelet for the first time. Her face crumpled with fresh tears. "The doctor said I had to wear it so they would know how to fix me when the bad men hurt me again." Angel's hands trembled as she examined the bracelet more closely. The date stamp showed it was 3 weeks old from the Children's Emergency Department at County General. The medical coding indicated treatment for multiple contusions and defensive wounds consistent with physical abuse. This wasn't the first time Aisha had been hurt. The bruises Marcus and Doc had documented were just the most recent in what appeared to be a pattern of systematic abuse stretching back months. "Who brought you to the hospital, sweetheart?" Angel asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Mama did. She was crying and saying she was sorry, that she should have protected me better. But the doctor said, if the bad men hurt me again, I might not get better." Angel felt rage building in her chest, the kind of protective fury that came from witnessing innocence destroyed by cruelty. Aisha hadn't just witnessed her mother's kidnapping. She'd been living in terror, subjected to repeated violence by people who should have protected her. "The bad men said if Mama told anybody about what she saw, they would hurt me worse," Aisha continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They said they knew where I went to school and where Mama worked, and that we could never hide from them." The implications hit Angel like physical blows. The Vipers hadn't just eliminated witnesses. They'd been systematically terrorizing Keisha Thompson and her daughter for weeks, using Aisha as leverage to ensure her mother's silence about whatever crime she'd witnessed. Angel's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Operation successful. Found intel." Coming to clinic, she quickly typed back. "Aisha having episodes. Found hospital bracelet. This is worse than we thought." When Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, he found Angel holding Aisha while the little girl colored in a medical chart that Doc had provided. But the drawing wasn't typical child artwork. It showed stick figures in recognizable poses of violence with remarkable detail for someone so young. "She's been documenting," Angel explained quietly, showing Marcus several drawings Aisha had completed. "Look at the faces, the tattoos, even the cars they drive. She's been watching and remembering everything." Marcus studied the drawings with growing amazement and horror. Aisha had captured details that professional witnesses often missed. Distinctive jewelry, facial scars, even license plate numbers rendered in a child's careful printing. "Aisha," Marcus said gently, sitting beside her on the examination table. "These pictures you draw, they help us understand what happened. Do you remember anything else about the bad men? Maybe something they said about where they took your mama?" Aisha looked up from her coloring, her dark eyes serious beyond her years. "They said they were taking her to the place where problems get solved, and the man with the gold teeth. He said she had until Sunday to decide if she wanted to be smart or if she wanted to join the policeman." Angel and Marcus exchanged glances. Today was Saturday. Keisha Thompson had less than 24 hours before the cartel carried out their threat. "Did they say anything else?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice calm, despite the urgency building inside him. Aisha nodded and reached for another piece of paper. With careful concentration, she began drawing what appeared to be a building with distinctive architectural features, loading docks, security cameras, and most importantly, the number 1247 written in large block letters above the entrance. "They kept saying this number," Aisha said, pointing to her drawing, 1247. The man with gold teeth said, "That's where all the problems go away." Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The address from the encrypted phone had been in the warehouse district, but they hadn't identified the specific building. Aisha's innocent memory had provided the final piece of intelligence they needed. "You did good, Aisha," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You helped us find your mama." The encrypted phone in Marcus's pocket buzzed with an incoming message. At exactly 6 a.m., Ghost translated the Spanish text with grim efficiency. "Exchange proposal. The woman for our soldier. 1 hour to respond." Marcus stared at the message, recognizing the tactical opportunity disguised as negotiation. The Vipers wanted their captured operative back, the man they'd zip-tied at the auto shop. In return, they were offering Keisha Thompson, though Marcus had no illusions about their intentions to honor any agreement. "It's a trap," Hammer said immediately. "They're not planning to hand her over alive." "Of course it's a trap," Marcus replied, already formulating a counter-strategy. "But it's also an opportunity. They have to bring her to the exchange point, which means moving her from their secure location." Angel looked up from where she was helping Aisha with breakfast. "You're not seriously considering this." "I'm considering using their trap against them," Marcus clarified. "They expect us to walk into an ambush. What they don't expect is for us to spring our own trap first." The warehouse at 1247 Halsted Street was a fortress of corrugated steel and concrete, surrounded by chain-link fencing, and monitored by security cameras that swept the perimeter in regular patterns. Marcus studied the building through binoculars from a rooftop 3 blocks away, noting guard positions, vehicle placements, and potential entry points. 4 men visible on the outside. He reported to Ghost, who was documenting everything in a tactical notebook. "Unknown number inside, but based on the cars, I'd estimate 12 to 15 total." "What about the woman?" Ghost asked. "No visual confirmation yet, but there's activity on the 2nd floor. Lights moving around, shadows behind windows. That's probably where they're holding her." Marcus's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, a heavily accented voice spoke in careful English. "You have something that belongs to us. We have something you want. Let us discuss business like civilized men." "I'm listening," Marcus said, gesturing for Ghost to record the conversation. "The parking lot behind St. Mary's Church, 1 hour. You bring Miguel, we bring the woman. Simple exchange, no complications." Marcus knew St. Mary's, an abandoned Catholic church in neutral territory, surrounded by open ground that would make ambush difficult but not impossible. More importantly, it was 5 miles from the warehouse, which meant they'd have to transport Keisha Thompson by vehicle. "How do I know she's still alive?" Marcus asked. There was a pause, followed by the sound of a phone being passed to someone else. A woman's voice came on the line, weak but unmistakably desperate. "Please, if you have my daughter, keep her safe. Don't let them." The line went dead. Marcus felt white-hot rage flood through him, but he forced his voice to remain steady when he called back. 1 hour, he confirmed. But if she's hurt, if there's so much as a bruise on her that wasn't there before, I'm going to take Miguel apart piece by piece before I let your people have him back. The laugh that came through the phone was cold and humorless. Bring friends if you want. We will be ready for you. After ending the call, Marcus spent 10 minutes in silence, studying the warehouse and formulating plans that required splitting his limited force while maximizing their advantages. The Vipers had superior numbers and defensive positions, but they also had to move their prisoner, which created vulnerability. "Here's how we do it," Marcus said. "Finally, the exchange is a diversion. While they're focused on St. Mary's, we hit the warehouse." Ghost looked up from his notes. "With how many men?" "You and Bulldog. 3-man entry team, while they're distracted by the fake exchange. Who handles the church?" "Hammer takes 4 men, and Miguel to the meeting. If things go according to plan, they'll be dealing with empty cars and confused cartel soldiers who don't know their prisoner is already rescued. It was a complex operation that required precise timing and flawless execution. If Marcus's team failed to extract Keisha Thompson before the exchange time, Hammer's group would be walking into a trap with no backup plan. But as Marcus looked at the warehouse where Aisha's mother was being held, he thought about the beaded necklace the little girl treasured, the symbol of family bonds that gave her hope even in the darkest moments. "One more thing," Marcus said, pulling out his backup pistol and checking the ammunition. "If this goes wrong, if we don't make it out, Angel knows what to do. She takes Aisha to the FBI and tells them everything." Ghost nodded grimly. "And if we do make it out?" Marcus smiled for the first time in hours, the expression carrying promises of violence that his enemies would soon understand. "Then the Vipers learn what happens when they threaten our family." The warehouse assault began at 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the scheduled exchange at St. Mary's Church. Marcus, Ghost, and Bulldog approached from 3 different directions, using shipping containers and abandoned vehicles for cover as they closed the distance to the building's perimeter. Marcus's earpiece crackled with Hammer's voice from the church location in position. "Target vehicles arriving now. Count 6 cars, approximately 20 personnel." "Copy that," Marcus whispered back. "Beginning entry sequence." The plan required surgical precision. While the Vipers focused their attention on the church meeting, Marcus's team would breach the warehouse, locate Keisha Thompson, and extract her before the cartel realized they'd been outmaneuvered. Ghost cut through the fence with bolt cutters, creating an entry point hidden from the security cameras by a conveniently placed dumpster. Bulldog disabled the building's external alarm system using techniques learned during his younger, more criminal years. The warehouse's ground floor was a maze of automotive parts and drug processing equipment. Marcus moved through the shadows with military precision, his father's tactical training guiding every step. 2 guards patrolled the main floor, but they were focused on external threats, not expecting infiltration from within their secure perimeter. Marcus took the first guard with a sleeper hold, lowering the unconscious man to the floor without making a sound. Bulldog handled the second guard with equal efficiency, proving that decades of street violence had taught him lessons about stealth that rivaled formal military training. "Ground floor secure," Marcus whispered into his radio. Moving to second level, the stairs creaked ominously under their weight, each step threatening to alert the guards above. But the sound of Spanish conversation and television noise from the second floor masked their approach. Marcus counted 3 distinct voices, possibly 4, all focused on something other than perimeter security. At the top of the stairs, A narrow hallway led to several rooms. Light spilled from under one door, accompanied by voices, and what sounded like someone crying softly. Marcus gestured for Ghost and Bulldog to take positions on either side of the door while he prepared to breach. The room beyond contained Keisha Thompson. She was tied to a chair in the center of the space, her face showing the effects of days of captivity and interrogation. But her eyes were alert, intelligent, and when she saw Marcus's face in the doorway, hope flickered across her features. 3 cartel soldiers occupied the room with her. One was cleaning a pistol at a small table. Another watched a basketball game on a portable television. The third sat directly across from Keisha, apparently conducting some form of psychological intimidation. Marcus burst through the door with explosive violence, his combat training taking over as he engaged multiple targets simultaneously. The soldier with the pistol went down first, Marcus's knife finding the gap between his ribs before he could raise his weapon. The man watching television spun toward the threat, but met Bulldog's brass knuckles with bone-crushing force. The third soldier, the one who had been tormenting Keisha, reached for a radio to call for backup. Ghost's suppressed pistol coughed once, and the man collapsed without making a sound. "Keisha," Marcus said gently, cutting her bonds with quick, efficient movements. "I'm Marcus Johnson. Your daughter Aisha is safe. We're here to take you home." Keisha's legs buckled when she tried to stand, days of captivity having weakened her physically, even as her spirit remained unbroken. Marcus caught her before she could fall, noting the bruises and cuts that spoke of systematic abuse. "Aisha," Keisha whispered, her voice hoarse from thirst and fear. "Is she really safe? She's with my people," Marcus assured her. "She's been asking for you every day. Drew pictures to help us find this place." Keisha's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief rather than despair. "She's so brave, braver than I've been." "You survived," Marcus said simply. "That took courage, too." Ghost's voice came through the radio with urgent intensity. "Marcus, we've got company. 4 vehicles just pulled into the parking lot. They know something's wrong." The sound of car doors slamming echoed from below, followed by shouted orders in Spanish. The element of surprise was gone, but they had what they'd come for. "Can you move?" Marcus asked Keisha. She nodded, determination replacing fear in her expression. "Whatever it takes to get back to my daughter." Marcus shouldered his rifle and helped Keisha toward the window that overlooked the warehouse's rear loading dock. Bulldog was already securing a rope for their descent, while Ghost covered the hallway approach. "Hammer, we've got the package," Marcus transmitted. "Beginning extraction now? Things are about to get loud from the church." Hammer's reply carried the sound of engines starting. "Copy that, creating noise to cover your exit." The beaded necklace around Keisha's neck caught the light as they prepared to rappel from the second-story window. The cultural pendant had been damaged during her captivity. Its string severed and the beads scattered, but Keisha clutched it tightly as Marcus helped her through the window, faith proving stronger than the violence that had tried to break it. The reunion at Doc's clinic was everything Marcus had hoped for, and more devastating than he'd expected. Aisha launched herself into her mother's arms with a cry of pure joy, but Keisha's response was a mixture of relief and agonizing guilt as she saw how thin her daughter had become, how the light in her eyes had dimmed. My baby, Keisha whispered, holding Aisha as if she might disappear again. "Mama's here now. Mama's never leaving you again." Doc worked quietly in the background, treating Keisha's injuries while mother and daughter clung to each other. The physical damage was extensive, but not life-threatening. Broken ribs, facial bruises, cuts that would heal with time. The psychological wounds ran deeper, visible in the way Keisha flinched at sudden sounds and kept Aisha pressed against her side as if forming a protective barrier against the world. Angel brought coffee and sandwiches that neither Keisha nor Aisha touched. Food seemed irrelevant compared to the miracle of being together again, but Marcus noticed how Keisha's hands shook when she reached for the coffee cup, how her eyes constantly scanned the room's exits as if calculating escape routes. "They kept asking about what I saw," Keisha said quietly, speaking to Marcus while Aisha dozed against her shoulder. "The policeman, Detective Johnson. They wanted to know if I told anyone, if I'd taken pictures, if there were other witnesses." Marcus felt cold rage building as Keisha described the systematic interrogation she'd endured. The Vipers hadn't just been eliminating a witness. They'd been conducting counterintelligence, trying to determine how much the authorities knew about their operation. They showed me pictures of Aisha at school, walking home, playing in the park, said they could reach her anytime they wanted, that the only way to keep her safe was to convince them I would never talk. "You don't have to worry about that anymore," Marcus said with quiet conviction. "We're going to make sure they can never threaten either of you again." But even as he spoke, Marcus knew the situation was more complex than simple protection. The Vipers had invested significant resources in eliminating Keisha as a witness. They wouldn't simply abandon that objective because she'd been rescued once. The encrypted phone in his pocket buzzed with an incoming message. Ghost translated the Spanish text with growing concern. "Warehouse compromised. Package retrieved by unknown hostiles. Implement Protocol 7 immediately." "What's Protocol 7?" Marcus asked. Ghost's face was grim. "I don't know, but the follow-up messages are mobilizing every cartel asset in the city. They're not just coming after us. They're going scorched earth." Doc looked up from bandaging Keisha's wrists. "Maybe it's time to involve federal authorities. FBI, DEA, someone with resources to protect witnesses." Keisha shook her head violently. "No police. They showed me pictures of the dead detective, said they owned half the department. How do we know who to trust?" Marcus understood her fear, but he also recognized the tactical reality they faced. The Iron Raven's MC could handle street fights and territorial disputes, but they weren't equipped for sustained warfare against a well-funded cartel with law enforcement connections. "There might be another way," Angel said quietly. She'd been making phone calls from Doc's office, using contacts from her bartending work to reach people who operated in the gray areas between legitimate business and criminal enterprise. "I know someone who knows someone in the federal system. Not local cops, FBI agents who specialize in cartel investigations." "Can they be trusted?" Marcus asked. "They can be motivated," Angel replied, "especially if we can offer them intelligence that helps them build cases against cartel leadership." Marcus considered this. Keisha's testimony about the detective's murder was valuable, but the photographs and financial records they'd recovered from the auto shop could potentially dismantle the entire Viper operation in the city. Aisha stirred in her mother's arms and opened her eyes. Without speaking, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, one of her hand-drawn cards. This one showed stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "With, thank you," written in careful block letters. "I made this for everyone who helped find Mama," Aisha said shyly, offering the card to Marcus. Marcus accepted the drawing, with hands that weren't entirely steady. In the midst of violence and tactical planning, Aisha's innocent gratitude reminded him of what they were really fighting for. Not territory or pride, but the right of a little girl to grow up without fear. "Aisha," Marcus said gently, "how would you and your mama feel about staying with some new friends for a while? People who are very good at keeping families safe." Aisha looked to her mother for guidance. Keisha studied Marcus's face, reading the concern and determination she found there. "As long as we stay together," Keisha said finally. "Whatever happens, Aisha and I stay together always," Marcus promised. "That's not negotiable." Marcus's phone rang at 3:00 a.m. with a call that would change everything. The voice on the other end belonged to Tommy Steele Washington, president of the Steel Talons MC from Milwaukee, a man Marcus had known for 15 years through the complex network of alliances that bound the motorcycle club world together. "Reaper, we got a problem," Steele said without preamble. "Word's out that the Vipers put a bounty on your club. 100,000 for your head, 50 for each of your lieutenants." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Cartel money could buy a lot of desperate men, and a bounty that size would attract professional killers from 3 states away. "How solid is this intel?" Marcus asked. "Solid enough that I'm calling you at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're also offering territory deals to any club that helps them take you down. Some of the smaller charters are considering it." The implications hit Marcus immediately. The Vipers weren't just targeting the Iron Ravens MC. They were trying to turn the entire biker community against them by offering rewards that exceeded most clubs' annual income. "I need to ask you straight," Marcus said. "Where do the Steel Talons stand?" Steele was quiet for a long moment. "You saved my nephew's life 2 years ago, when those meth dealers tried to muscle in on our territory." Steel Talons don't forget debts. Relief flooded through Marcus, but Steele wasn't finished. "But we're not the only club they've approached. The Vipers are playing this smart, dividing the community instead of fighting everyone at once. You need allies, Reaper, and you need them fast." Within 6 hours, Marcus's clubhouse had become a war council. Representatives from 5 motorcycle clubs sat around tables that had been pushed together to accommodate the unprecedented gathering. The Steel Talons had come from Milwaukee. The Wind Riders had ridden up from Indianapolis. The Nighthawks had traveled from Detroit. Even the Shadow Wolves, despite their long-standing rivalry with Iron Ravens, had sent 2 representatives. Each club president wore the distinctive rings that marked their leadership. Heavy silver bands engraved with their club's symbols, worn as badges of honor and authority. Marcus studied these rings as he laid out the situation, knowing that each man's decision would affect hundreds of club members and their families. "The way I see it," Marcus began, "the Vipers are trying to eliminate us first. Then they'll come for the rest of you one by one. They're offering territory now, but cartels don't share power long-term." Jamal Diesel Harris from the Wind Riders leaned forward. "What kind of resources are we talking about? How many soldiers can they field?" Ghost consulted his intelligence notes. "Conservative estimate 60 to 80 active fighters in the immediate area, with backup available from Milwaukee and Cleveland. They've got military-grade weapons, communication equipment, and enough money to buy support from street gangs and independent contractors." And us asked Jennifer Phoenix Lee from the Shadow Wolves, the only female club president in the room. "Combined strength of maybe 40 experienced fighters," Marcus admitted. "But we know this territory. We have community support, and we're fighting for our homes instead of profit." The silence that followed was heavy with calculation. Each president was weighing the risks of joining a war against the potential consequences of letting the cartel eliminate their strongest regional ally. Tommy Steele broke the silence first. "Steel Talons are in. We've been hearing about cartel expansion for months. Better to fight them now while we have help than wait for them to come for us individually." Phoenix nodded slowly. "Shadow Wolves, too. I've got daughters who go to school in this city. I'm not letting cartel scum turn our neighborhoods into war zones." One by one, the other presidents voiced their commitment, not just to helping Marcus, but to protecting the independence that made their lifestyle possible. The Vipers represented everything they stood against, organized crime that preyed on communities instead of protecting them. "All right then," Marcus said, feeling the weight of leadership settle on his shoulders like armor. "We're looking at coordinated warfare against an enemy with superior resources. This isn't about territory or club pride anymore. This is about survival." Diesel pulled out a detailed map of the metropolitan area. "What's our strategy?" Marcus smiled for the first time in days, the expression carrying promises of violence that would echo through cartel communications for years to come. "We hit them everywhere at once. Make them choose between protecting their operations and hunting us, Force them to fight on our terms in our territory against people who know every street and alley. Phoenix studied the map with professional interest. Simultaneous strikes on their key locations. Exactly. But first, we make sure Keisha Thompson and her daughter are somewhere the cartel can never reach them. Marcus pulled out his own ring, a simple band bearing the Iron Raven's death's head, and placed it on the table beside the others. The gesture was symbolic, but powerful, representing the unity of purpose that would either save them all or see them die together. This ends when the Vipers are gone, or we are, Marcus said quietly. No middle ground, no negotiation, no surrender. The assembled presidents nodded in grim agreement, understanding that they were committing to total war. The tactical planning session stretched through the night as Marcus spread hand-drawn battle maps across every available surface in the clubhouse. His father's military training merged with decades of street warfare experience as he orchestrated the most complex operation in Iron Raven's history. 17 targets, Marcus announced, marking locations with red X's on the master map. Drug labs, safe houses, money laundering operations, and their communication hub. We hit them all simultaneously at 4 m.c.m. tomorrow. Ghost studied the assignments with professional appreciation. Each target had been carefully selected based on intelligence gathered from the encrypted phone and reconnaissance conducted by Alliance members. The goal wasn't just destruction, it was systematic dismantling of the Viper's entire operational network. Nighthawks, take the drug labs on the south side, Marcus continued, pointing to Marcus Thompson. Your people know chemistry, so you'll know how to destroy their product without creating toxic clouds. Thompson nodded. His club included several former military explosive specialists who could render the labs permanently unusable without endangering the surrounding neighborhood. Shadow Wolves handle the money laundering operations downtown. Phoenix, your people have experience with financial systems from your legitimate businesses. Phoenix Lee had built her club's reputation on running successful motorcycle dealerships while maintaining their outlaw credibility. Her team could identify and destroy financial records while documenting evidence for federal authorities. Steel Talons take the north side safe houses. Steel, you got the most experience with urban assault tactics. Tommy Steele's Steel Talons had been conducting precision raids against rival gangs for years. Their discipline and tactical coordination made them perfect for the high-risk residential targets. Wind Riders coordinate with local law enforcement to ensure emergency services stay clear of the combat zones. Diesel Harris's connections in legitimate security work gave him relationships with police supervisors who could be trusted to redirect patrol routes without asking uncomfortable questions. Iron Ravens handle the communication hub and Oro's personal compound. Marcus had reserved the most dangerous targets for his own people. Luis Oro Ramirez, the gold-toothed killer who had terrorized Aisha and Keisha, would be Marcus's personal responsibility. But the most critical element of the operation wasn't on any map. Keisha Thompson and Aisha were being moved to a secure federal facility 200 miles away under the protection of FBI agents who specialized in witness protection. Angel would accompany them, ensuring continuity of care for Aisha while providing an additional layer of security. What about extraction? Asked Phoenix. If things go sideways, how do we get our people out? Marcus pulled out a stopwatch and set it on the table. 30-minute window for all operations in and out before they can coordinate a response. Anyone not clear by 4:30 a.m. falls back to predetermined rally points for regrouping. The precision required was staggering. 47 bikers conducting 17 simultaneous raids across a metropolitan area, all timed to prevent the cartel from shifting resources to defend priority targets. One mistake, one delayed team could compromise the entire operation. Ghost raised a tactical concern that had been bothering him since the planning began. What if they've anticipated this? The Vipers aren't street dealers. They've got sophisticated intelligence capabilities. Marcus had considered this possibility extensively. That's why we're not just hitting their operations. We're hitting their ability to respond. Communications first, command structure second, then systematic destruction of their infrastructure. The battle map showed the operation's elegant complexity. Each target was connected to others by lines indicating command relationships, supply chains, and communication networks. By striking multiple points simultaneously, the alliance would create cascade failures that prevented effective cartel response. "Equipment check," Marcus ordered, moving to the practical concerns of urban warfare. Each team had been supplied with tactical radios, night vision equipment, and weapons appropriate to their targets. The Steel Talons carried suppressed firearms for close-quarters combat. The Nighthawks had explosive charges for destroying manufacturing equipment. The Shadow Wolves brought electronic devices for copying computer files before destruction. Marcus's team possessed the most sophisticated gear, military-grade communication interceptors that would allow them to monitor cartel radio traffic in real time. Knowledge of enemy movements could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. "Last chance for anyone to walk away," Marcus said, surveying the assembled faces. "Once this starts, there's no going back. The Vipers will hunt everyone involved until either they're dead or we are." No one moved. Steele voiced what everyone was thinking. "We crossed that line when we decided to protect the kid. Now we finish what they started." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his club colors. The Iron Ravens patch that identified him as president. With deliberate ceremony, he cut it from his jacket using a combat knife and handed it to Angel. "If we don't come back, make sure Aisha knows that some people still fight for what's right." Angel accepted the patch with trembling hands, understanding that Marcus wasn't just preparing for battle. He was preparing for the possibility that he might not survive to see the war's end. "Time to ride," Marcus said simply. The sound of 47 motorcycles starting simultaneously echoed through the pre-dawn darkness, like thunder announcing the storm to come. The coordinated assault began at exactly 4 Kauraf a.m., with the precision of a military operation. Across the city, 17 teams moved simultaneously against their targets, while Marcus's voice crackled through encrypted radio channels, coordinating the largest biker alliance operation in Midwest history. Thunder 1. Target acquired, came Thompson's voice from the Southside Drug Lab. Beginning demolition sequence. Shadow Leader. Financial center secured, reported Phoenix Lee. Downloading hard drives now. Steel Talon Alpha encountering resistance at Safe House 3. Request backup. Marcus monitored the radio traffic while leading his own team toward Oro's compound, a fortified warehouse that served as the cartel's regional command center. Ghost rode beside him, constantly adjusting their tactical radio to intercept Viper communications. "They're scrambling," Ghost reported, calling for reinforcements from Milwaukee. "But they don't know how many targets are under attack." The compound loomed ahead, surrounded by razor wire and illuminated by floodlights that created harsh shadows between the buildings. Marcus counted 6 guards visible on the perimeter, but thermal imaging suggested twice that number inside the main structure. "Bulldog, take the communications array," Marcus ordered. "Cut their ability to coordinate with other cells." Bulldog Jenkins moved like a shadow toward the radio tower, his years of criminal expertise allowing him to approach within striking distance of the guards without detection. The first sentry went down silently, taken out by a sleeper hold that left him unconscious but alive. Marcus's rules of engagement were clear. Eliminate threats but avoid unnecessary killing. This was about dismantling an organization, not conducting a massacre. The main assault began when Wrench disabled the compound's electrical system, plunging the area into darkness that favored the attackers. Marcus's team moved through the shadows with night vision equipment, systematically clearing buildings while searching for their primary target. Oro was exactly where intelligence suggested he would be in the compound central office, desperately trying to re-establish communication with his scattered forces. The man who had terrorized Aisha and tortured Keisha was hunched over a radio, screaming orders in Spanish that no one could hear. "Luis Ramirez!" Marcus called from the doorway. his voice carrying quiet authority. Oro spun toward the sound, his gold teeth gleaming in the green glow of Marcus's night vision as he reached for a pistol on the desk. But Marcus had been expecting the movement, and his own weapon was already trained on the cartel lieutenant. "Don't," Marcus said simply. "You've caused enough pain." For a moment, the two men stared at each other across the office that represented everything wrong with organized crime. Oro saw his death in Marcus's eyes, but instead of surrendering, he lunged for his gun with the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. Marcus's shot was precise and final. Oro collapsed behind his desk, the man who had haunted a little girl's nightmares reduced to just another casualty of the war he had helped start. "Primary target eliminated," Marcus reported into his radio, searching for intelligence materials. The office contained a treasure trove of cartel documents, financial records, personnel files, photographs of corrupt officials, and most importantly, a detailed organizational chart showing the Viper's complete command structure from Milwaukee to Mexico City. Gutser said, "Photograph everything," Marcus ordered. "The feds are going to want this information." From across the city, radio reports continued streaming in. The Nighthawks had successfully destroyed 3 drug labs without casualties. The Shadow Wolves had retrieved financial records that would expose the cartel's money laundering network. The Steel Talons had secured 4 safe houses and captured 6 cartel soldiers alive. But it was Ghost's interception of enemy communications that provided the most crucial intelligence. "Marcus, you need to hear this," Ghost said, holding up the tactical radio. "They're evacuating their leadership. Emergency extraction protocol, destination unknown. The Vipers were cutting their losses, abandoning their territorial expansion in favor of protecting their senior command. It was exactly the outcome Marcus had hoped for. Victory without the need for prolonged warfare that would endanger civilian populations. "All teams, begin extraction sequence," Marcus ordered. "Primary objectives achieved." As the Alliance forces withdrew from their targets, Marcus took one final look around Oro's office. On the desk, amid the scattered papers and broken radio equipment, lay a photograph of Aisha and Keisha Thompson taken from surveillance footage. Someone had written, "Eliminate" across it in red ink. Marcus pocketed the photograph. Evidence of the threat that would never trouble this family again. The man responsible was dead, his organization dismantled, his ability to terrorize innocent people permanently destroyed. The war was over. The Viper's expansion into Iron Raven's territory had ended not with negotiation or territorial compromise, but with the kind of decisive action that sent messages throughout the criminal underworld. Some fights were worth having. Regardless of the cost, 3 months later, Marcus sat in the witness chair of a federal courtroom, wearing the only suit he owned and trying not to fidget under the scrutiny of cameras that would broadcast his testimony across the nation. The U.S. Attorney had assured him that his cooperation would be kept confidential, but courtroom proceedings had a way of becoming public despite official promises. At the prosecution table, Keisha Thompson sat beside FBI agent Sarah Chen, the woman who had coordinated the federal investigation that followed the Alliance's assault on the Vipers. Keisha looked healthier than she had in months, the haunted expression replaced by quiet determination as she prepared to testify against the cartel members who had terrorized her family. "Mr. Johnson," the prosecutor began, "can you describe for the jury the evidence your organization recovered during the operation of September 15th? Marcus's testimony was carefully scripted to avoid admitting to specific crimes while providing the intelligence that federal agents needed to dismantle the remaining cartel network. The photographs, financial records, and organizational charts recovered from Oro's compound led to 17 indictments and the seizure of over $40 million in cartel assets. We recovered documents showing systematic corruption of local law enforcement," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the weight of speaking truth in a forum where lies were often more comfortable. bank records indicating money laundering operations, personnel files identifying cartel members throughout Illinois. The defense attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who specialized in representing organized crime figures, approached for cross-examination with the predatory confidence of someone accustomed to destroying witness credibility. "Mr. Johnson, isn't it true that you and your associates obtained this evidence through breaking and entering assault and destruction of property?" Marcus met her gaze without flinching. "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." It was a dance both sides understood. Marcus's testimony provided crucial evidence, while legal immunity protected him from prosecution for methods that fell outside constitutional boundaries. The greater good sometimes required compromising perfect justice. When Keisha took the stand, her testimony carried the moral authority that legal technicalities couldn't undermine. She described the murder she had witnessed, the systematic intimidation of her family, and the fear that had driven her to seek protection from people society labeled as criminals. "They told me that if I testified, they would find my daughter no matter where we hid," Keisha said, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "But these men, these bikers, everyone says are dangerous. They protected us when no one else would." The jury, 12 citizens who had probably never seen the inside of a motorcycle clubhouse, listened with visible emotion as Keisha described how Marcus and his people had risked their lives to save a stranger's child. In the gallery, Aisha sat between Angel and Doc, coloring in a new book while occasionally looking up to wave at her mother. She had started school in their new city, was making friends, and according to her therapist, was healing from the trauma with remarkable resilience. The trial's outcome was never in doubt. Carlos Jefe Morales received life in prison without parole. 3 corrupt police officers were sentenced to federal prison terms. The Vipers' financial network was dismantled, their assets forfeited, their territorial expansion permanently halted. But for Marcus, the real victory had happened months earlier in a small examination room where a little girl had stopped having nightmares about men with gold teeth. After his testimony, Marcus walked through the courthouse corridors past news reporters who shouted questions about biker violence and vigilante justice. He ignored them all, focused on the exit that would take him back to a world where actions mattered more than words. Outside, Keisha was waiting with Aisha, both of them protected by federal marshals who would ensure their safety for as long as necessary. Aisha broke away from her handlers and ran to Marcus, throwing small arms around his waist in a hug that lasted long enough for photographers to capture the moment. "Thank you for keeping your promise," Aisha said, looking up at him with eyes that had regained their childhood brightness. Marcus knelt down to her level, accepting a new drawing she had made. This one showing a little girl and her mother standing in front of a house with a white picket fence and flowers in the yard. "That's our new home," Aisha explained proudly. "Mama says we don't have to be scared anymore because the bad men are all in jail." "That's right, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion he didn't try to hide. "You're safe now." The wooden gavel that had sealed the convictions represented more than legal justice. It symbolized the moment when organized evil was held accountable by ordinary people who refused to accept that innocence couldn't be protected. Some victories were worth any price. 1 year after that stormy night when a little girl had knocked on their door, Marcus stood in a family court judge's chambers, his hands shaking as he signed adoption papers that would make Aisha Thompson legally his daughter. The process had taken months of background checks, home visits, and psychological evaluations, but the social workers had eventually concluded that Marcus Johnson could provide the stability and protection that Aisha needed. "Congratulations, Mr. Johnson," Judge Patricia Williams said, stamping the final documents with an official seal. "Aisha is now legally your responsibility, and your family." Marcus looked down at the papers that transformed him from a biker president into something he'd never imagined becoming: a father. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man who had spent decades avoiding conventional family responsibilities was now committed to raising a child whose courage had saved his soul. Keisha stood beside him, healthy and radiant in a way that spoke of genuine healing rather than mere recovery. She had completed trauma counseling, found work as a translator for the federal court system, and most importantly, had formed a relationship with David Kim from the community garden. Their romance had blossomed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared appreciation for second chances. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather trust with Aisha's future," Keisha said, a voice carrying the conviction of someone who had learned to recognize genuine protection from its counterfeit. "You saved us both, Marcus. Now we're saving you right back." The transformation of the Iron Ravens Clubhouse had been gradual but profound. The bar still served whiskey, and the walls still displayed motorcycle memorabilia. But there were also children's toys in a corner, a small television tuned to cartoons on weekends, and house rules that included no cursing when Aisha's around, and violent discussions happen in the back room only. The other club members had adapted to their new reality with surprising grace. Doc had become Aisha's unofficial grandfather, teaching her about anatomy and first aid with the patience of someone who understood that children absorbed knowledge differently than adults. Aisha had appointed himself her personal bodyguard, ensuring that she could walk to school safely in a neighborhood where his reputation provided better protection than any security system. Even Snake Davis, perhaps the gruffest member of the Brotherhood, had been discovered reading bedtime stories to Aisha when Marcus was away on club business. His dramatic interpretations of fairy tales had become legendary among the membership. But it was Angel who had truly made Marcus's transformation possible. She had moved into his apartment above the clubhouse, creating a stable home environment while maintaining the fierce independence that had attracted him to her originally. Their relationship had evolved from passionate but uncertain to something deeper, a partnership built on shared values and mutual respect. "The school called today," Angel reported, as they settled into their evening routine. "Aisha's teacher wants to talk about advancing her to the next grade. Apparently, she's testing above her age level in reading and mathematics." Marcus felt pride swell in his chest, the kind of parental emotion he was still learning to navigate. Aisha's intelligence had always been evident, but formal education was revealing depths that her traumatic early years had temporarily obscured. "She's been working on a special project," Angel continued, pulling out a folder from Aisha's backpack, a presentation about heroes for her social studies class. Inside the folder were photographs, drawings, and a carefully written essay titled, "My Dad, the Hero." Aisha had documented Marcus's military background, his leadership of the motorcycle club, and most importantly, his decision to protect her family when no one else would. "Listen to this," Angel said, reading from Aisha's essay. "My dad taught me that being a hero isn't about being perfect or following all the rules. Sometimes being a hero means standing up to bad people, even when it's dangerous. My dad and his friends saved me and my mama from very bad men, and now we have a family that loves us." Marcus felt tears threatening as Angel continued reading. Aisha had captured truths about courage and sacrifice that most adults struggled to articulate, expressing them with the clarity that came from experiencing both terror and salvation firsthand. The adoption papers lay on the kitchen table beside Aisha's homework, official documents that couldn't begin to capture the emotional complexity of their unconventional family, but they provided legal recognition of bonds that had been forged in crisis and strengthened through daily acts of love and protection. That night, as Marcus tucked Aisha into bed in her room, decorated with motorcycle posters and fairy tale books, she asked the question that had become their bedtime ritual. "Tell me the story about the night I found you, Daddy." Marcus smiled, settling into the chair beside her bed that had become his favorite piece of furniture in the world. "Once upon a time," he began, "a very brave little girl knocked on the door of some rough men who didn't know they needed saving. 2 years later, on another stormy October night, Marcus found himself standing on the front porch of the Iron Ravens clubhouse, watching 9-year-old Aisha help a frightened boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. The child had appeared at their door 30 minutes earlier, dirty and terrified, clutching a backpack and stammering about men who had hurt his sister. "It's okay, Michael," Aisha said, with the gentle authority of someone who understood fear intimately. "My dad and his friends help kids who are in trouble." "You're safe now." Marcus watched his daughter legally, emotionally, completely his daughter, guide the boy toward the clubhouse entrance with the same instinctive protectiveness that had once driven her to seek sanctuary here herself. She had grown taller and stronger, her dark braids now reaching her shoulders. But her eyes still carried the wisdom that came from surviving trauma and finding healing. "Daddy," Aisha called, looking back at Marcus with complete confidence in his ability to solve problems that overwhelmed most adults. "Michael needs help finding his sister. Bad men took her like they took Mama." Marcus knelt down to the boy's level, recognizing the signs he'd learned to identify over the past 2 years. The Iron Ravens MC had become an unofficial sanctuary for endangered children. There,